Welcome back to Liberty Bites on the Think Liberty Network. I'm your host, William Gaston. You can follow me on Twitter at William_Gaston and follow Think Liberty on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever your favorite social media outlet is. You can also follow me on Facebook at William Gaston Political Commentator. Give us a follow and a like for updates on new episodes and more. We also have a Patreon now, so if you'd like to support our work, check it out at patreon.com/ThinkLibertyPatrons. All right, so I know at least the last year, maybe the year before, when it came to the State of the Union address, I kind of did a play-by-play or line-by-line and sort of expressed my thoughts on that. I'm not going to do that this time, and mainly that's just based on the fact that there's so much going on right now at once. So I do want to touch on the highlights, but there's also a lot of tertiary events that are going on around it. So first and foremost, as I was watching it, I noticed the handshake thing, right? So Trump hands Pelosi her copy of the speech. She reaches out to shake his hand. He keeps turning away from her and doesn't shake her hand. So everybody was going, that's disrespectful and this and that. So everybody was talking about that at first, all of the commentators on the different mainstream media channels and all of this other stuff. But then, of course, at the end of the speech, Pelosi rips it up. And at least on the channel I was watching, the camera was kind of panning away from her, but caught it in the corner. And one of the commentators said, I think she just ripped the speech up. Did she just rip the speech up? So let's isolate those two events and talk about those things first, because unfortunately, that's ended up sort of creating an overcast above everything else that happened, and that's what everybody's focusing on. So as far as the handshake thing, I think it's pretty clear that Trump may not have seen her stretch her hand out to shake his hand. He might have. If he did, I would say that's just as disrespectful as her tearing up the speech. And her tearing up the speech was pretty damn disrespectful. But the point here that we can take from both of these isolated events, so Trump not shaking her hand, assuming that he saw it and snubbed her anyway, and then, of course, her tearing up the speech, both of these things were incredibly disrespectful, because at the end of the day, these are two elected representatives, two politicians that represent we the people, that are acting out their feud in public. It's unprofessional, but it's disrespectful, not just to one another, it's disrespectful to us, the people that they're supposed to be working for. So at the end of the day, we need to be demanding better from our representatives and how they represent us. It's not about the feud that they have going on between them. It's about how they are representing us and what they are doing in our name. And as an aside, I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but it honestly wouldn't surprise me that much if... Now, I think the animosity between Trump and Pelosi is legitimate. I think that's real. But there are certain things in politics, especially nowadays, because it's so easily and massively publicized, it would not surprise me at all if you have two completely polar opposite figures in politics that are, quote-unquote, feuding in the public eye, but then are having drinks together at some, fancy club in D.C. At this point, how do we know for sure that a lot of this stuff isn't just smoke and mirrors? It's, it's essentially 90s wrestling, it's WWE in political form, and we're all just eating it up. So what all is going on behind the scenes? Just something to consider. So with the tearing up of the speech, that's what everyone is primarily focusing on right now. And there's plenty of outrage over it. And there's actually a lot of Democrats and left-leaning individuals that are coming after Pelosi for tearing up the speech. But at the same time, could the fact that she tore up the speech and everyone's focus being on that right now, is it possible that that's actually Pelosi's silver lining here? I mean, I think she's being punished. She's being scoriated up and down even with her own party for this. But at the same time, while everyone is focusing on what she did in tearing up the speech, They're not focusing on the content of the speech itself. So maybe that's a silver lining for Pelosi. But either way, the fallout that's coming from all of this stuff is indicative of a very troubling pattern on both sides of supporters or detractors of one side or the other, either lionizing or villainizing the two sides with zero critical thought. And so that's what I want to get to, the titular point of this episode, that we all need to take a step back away from this team sports mentality. I am so sick of seeing everyone act as apologists for their quote-unquote team and overlooking the legitimate bad things that their team is doing because it's their team, instead of demanding better. And I'm so sick of those same people, again, on both sides, pointing to the other team and saying, those people are evil, those people are villains. I think there are legitimate evil people on both sides, okay? I'm not saying that it's not the case in any way. But to say that one side or the other is all good or all bad is totally ignoring not only the state of politics in America today, but human nature itself. It just doesn't work that way. So we're only lying to ourselves, and we're only hurting ourselves by taking on this completely subjective thought. We need to bring critical thinking back. We need to take a step back from this team sports mentality that we have in politics now. So in the spirit of that, let's take a look at this speech. Let's go through some highlights. So you have the Tuskegee Airmen, the soldier coming home, highlighting the children that have dealt with hardship. These are all good things to bring attention to. But ultimately, that's not what the State of the Union speech is supposed to be about. Just as a little bit of background here, the State of the Union speech was originally intended, I can't recall exactly where it is in the Constitution, but essentially there's a part in the Constitution that directs the president to update Congress on the State of the Union. This was originally envisioned and intended to be an opportunity for the president to sit down with Congress and to have an open discussion about how things are going, keeping that line of communication open. Of course, over time, that has evolved, and now it's more about the president speaking to the people, and Congress is also present. So as a result of that, you do have these nice things that happen that are highlighted. I think these are good things, but it's really just tapestry when you're considering what the focus of the speech is. So getting into the focus of the speech, what the titular State of the Union is, President Trump talks about how, well, socialism will never take over our healthcare industry, and we're doing this and that, and doing these different things to help that along. So, for example, he's talking about his push to make itemized prices in hospitals, and bring more accountability to the healthcare market. I think that's a good thing. But for him to say that socialism will never take over our healthcare industry, then several sentences later promises that Social Security and Medicare will always be protected. What's that Sesame Street song? One of these things is not like the other, right? You see where I'm going with this. Those are two completely opposite things from one another. Social Security and Medicare are the two biggest, quote-unquote, socialist programs that we have. And frankly, we need to completely abolish both of them. But for him to openly say that socialism will never take over our healthcare industry, we will never be a socialist country, and then promising to protect these two massive socialist programs. I mean, Social Security is the second most singular, expensive program that we have in the United States federal government, or under the federal government's purview, second only to our military spending. And Medicare is pretty high up there too. So he unabashedly says these two things within sentences of one another and just assumes that no one's going to point it out. And I think for the most part, he's right. I know this is anecdotal, but when I go onto Facebook and admittedly, I troll some folks. People were posting about, oh, it's so great that he said this and he said that. And I go into the comment section and I say, okay, but what about this thing that he said? And instantly get shut down. Instantly. And it's not even based on any legitimate arguments. It's just, well, President Trump has to say these things to placate these people or whatever the case may be. Don't make excuses for that. Demand better. And then he says that the Second Amendment will be upheld. But he's done more damage to it than Obama did. For example, the bump stock ban. He goes to the ATF, which is already an unconstitutional organization based on Article 1 and the 10th Amendment in the Constitution. The ATF is already an unconstitutional organization. But he goes a step further, and he had the ATF write a letter or a memo, which somehow becomes law, banning bump stocks. Now, I don't care what your personal opinion is on bump stocks. Well, it's just an accessory, or it's just a toy, and, well, it makes your firearm inaccurate. It doesn't matter. The point is, that is something that is clearly connected to the Second Amendment, and he unilaterally banned it through unconstitutional means. Don't make excuses. Demand better. And, of course, he's not doing anything to support pro-2A advocates around the country against red flag laws, except for, well, I think he tweeted something concerning the January 20th protests in Richmond. That's it. This guy is not practicing what he preaches, and we should have an issue with that. That's not to say Orange Man bad. That's to say that we need to demand better. Now, those things being said, he did highlight a lot of really good things that he has done. So the economy is booming. He's breaking records when it comes to economic gains, economic growth. There's record low unemployment for minorities and women, etc. These are all good things. And he should be praised for these things because those are things that he has overseen and that he is instrumental in making happen. So that's fine. Again, we need to all take a step back. We need to reintroduce objective vision. We need to introduce critical thought into how we look at all of these different issues. Don't say all of these people are bad and all of these people are good. We need to take these things in isolation and issue by issue express what we agree with and express what we don't agree with. That is how we grow. That is how we move forward. So we have to stop this team sports mentality. So in the meantime, going back to the speech ripping, I want to get into something that I tweeted out a few weeks ago. The idea that the Democrat Party will not survive 2020. And I think recent events are only supporting this statement. So, for example, you have the older Democrats, the more traditional Democrats, and then this far left faction like AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Presley, I forget her first name. So you have these far left factionists, but they're all younger. They're more driven. They're using social media as an instrument far more effectively than their older, more seasoned counterparts. But the ideological shift between these two factions cannot be overstated. When you have these older groups, the more mainstream Democrats start to retire, start to pass away, all of these different things happening, these younger, far leftist factions and individuals are going to be coming up and taking over the Democrat Party. But in the meantime, they're already eschewing, they're outright ignoring, I should say. They're ignoring the party lines as they have been drawn for the last several decades. Pelosi is completely out of her element in dealing with these people. They are leading the charge into a new far left future for the Democrat Party, and Pelosi can't control them. And then on top of that, you have all of this infighting amongst the presidential candidates. You have Hillary Clinton, who's not even running, throwing shade at Bernie Sanders, for example. And Biden doesn't even know where he is or who he's talking to most of the time. What is going on? You do not in any way have a united front across the Democrat Party. You have Pelosi tearing up the speech. You have freshman Democrat congresspeople addressing her directly and saying that was a mistake, that was disrespectful, you shouldn't have done that. There is no cohesion in the Democrat Party. And when they lose the 2020 election, and I believe that they will lose the 2020 election, it's just going to completely collapse. We're seeing the beginnings of the implosion of the Democrat Party. And it's interesting, to say the least, to speculate where that may go from there. You know, will they just fundamentally change but maintain the name and the banner and the symbolism, or will they split into an entirely new party? Will the Democrat Party, even in name, cease to exist? But let me draw this back to where I want to go for this entire episode. So at the end of the day, we have to understand that our elected representatives, they're not gods, they're not devils. You know, the other team isn't made up of the incarnation of Satan, and our team isn't made up of God emperors. They're all men and they're all women just like us. And they aren't to be worshipped or feared. They're to be held accountable by us. And not just for the good things they do, but especially for the bad things. So in order to do this, we all need to take a step back and view politics through an objective lens, and stop this habit of ignoring the bad things that our team does in our name, while ignoring some of the good things that the other team does. Because at the end of the day, the success of a constitutional republic like the U.S. hinges on an informed, outspoken citizenry and elected representatives that are held accountable by them. If we don't maintain that, we will fall into tyranny. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join me next week to become more liberty-centered with us. I'm William Gaston with Think Liberty.